Serious, Redditors who killed someone. What happened? I was walking to work at 3 AM when this guy staggered out of the woods with a knife and his belt undone. Before I could react, he tackled me to the ground. Broke 3 of my ribs. I kind of kneed him in the elbow and he dropped the knife and tried to choke him long enough to render him unconscious. And I did. He never woke up. It still bothers me. I was arrested and questioned in the hospital. Uncuffed the following morning after the police obtained security camera footage. I've been asked before how I managed to hold the choke long enough to kill him. I don't know. I may have crushed his windpipe. I have no concept of how long the choke, or even the whole situation, lasted. Humans have an instinct called hysterical strength. As someone else said, we don't really use this unless it's a dire life or death situation due to the fact that this will destroy our body. But in the case of life or death, the body doesn't really matter as long as you survive. Wasn't there a case of this when a woman literally lifted a car to save her kids and tearing the muscles in her arms in the process? I've heard that one. Also, some guy who was rock climbing and got pinned down by a big rock and shredded his muscles lifting it. So adrenaline is basically Kaioken from Dragon Ball. Kaioken is described by King Kai as being extremely dangerous to be used sparingly and with the utmost care. I'm willing to bet the writer based it on this. My husband and I only had one car at the time and I had to ride with him to work one morning around 4 AM so I could drive back home. It was raining and the road wasn't lit. We were just chatting with one another and I was reaching for the CD album for some tunes. I looked up for a moment and thought I saw what looked like a crumpled up blanket or trash bag or something in the road, but I couldn't make it out at all. My husband was driving and couldn't see it at all. Neither of us got to see for sure what it was until the headlights got close enough, and by then it was too late to react. It was a man, curled up in a ball in the middle of the road, dressed completely in black clothing. I remember crying out just a half second before we struck him and went over him. It hasn't even dawned on my husband what had just happened and I was screaming and crying in horror. My husband was also very distraught and was shaking. I told him he has to call 911 and get help, so he did. He got out of the car and went over to check on the man and see if he was responsive at all. Nothing. The ambulance and cops came. They asked us a bunch of questions and the whole routine. The news crews came out to film everything. That man died on the way to the hospital. This haunted me for over a year after it happened. A month or so later we found out that the man had abandoned his truck at a nearby gas station and walked away. He wasn't from the area either. We learned that 2 of his friends came down here to talk to him and tried to get him to go back home with them and get back into rehab, but he had refused and said he wasn't coming back. There was a lot of alcohol and meth in his system. I don't know what that does to a person when those things are mixed, but somehow this guy found his way into the middle of a poorly lit city street and curled himself up. I'll never know why he was there. I'm still afraid of driving on rainy nights. I don't think I slept well at all for a while afterwards. I have to travel that same road to work and now I always think about it when I pass that spot on the road. It really sounds like he was trying to kill himself. All the details in your story point to that being the most probable reason he was in that situation. And, as much as I have sympathy for whatever struggles he may have been dealing with, putting that kind of burden and trauma on a random, innocent person is a truly selfish thing to do. It's a tragedy, but you should not feel guilty for what happened. It wasn't your fault in the slightest bit. The police officer also said this. He believed this was a suicide and we were the unsuspecting participants. I was angry at this guy for doing this to us, to his parents and his friends that were trying to save him. But I've also been in a place where I wanted my life to just be over with. So I felt for him as much as I was angry with him. I guess if there was anything positive about it, he didn't have any kids or a wife. My ex-husband committed suicide just a few months after this, leaving behind 3 children. That did major damage to my children. That was just a rough year. I'm so sorry. I hope the kids are okay. They miss their dad. I miss him too as a co-parent and I need him as someone that knows our kids the way I do. It could have been a great thing between us for our kids. Now with this virus being a big deal, my oldest came to me today concerned about what is going to happen to them if I die. I'm their only surviving parent now. So he has a valid concern, but I don't want to frighten him. I have my husband in line to care for them if I die and they seem happy with that. It's just sad that I have to make these plans before I turn 40. It's like I'm back in the Civil War and the life expectancy was like 45 or something. I was working as a cleaner at an aged care. Resident, with severe dementia, was sleeping. I decided to mop the floor in her room while she was asleep. Resident woke up and decided to get out of bed without assistance. Resident slipped on wet floor. Carers found her unconscious and called ambulance. Resident died at the scene. Nothing came of it as Resident had no living relatives. I got told it was the carer's fault for not keeping a close eye on Resident, but I blame myself. I still think about this late at night. The floor could have been completely dry and that Resident still could slip in it in stockings or bare feet. Not your fault by a mile. I'm an RN. Falls kill all the time and the only people responsible are the caregivers who failed to keep them safe. Thank you for your comment, it gives me comfort. Unfortunately, death is something that's a part of aged care work. This hits closer to home, having someone's death be the result of my actions. Sometimes I can't help thinking if I did things differently that day she would have lived longer. Thoughts such as if I cleaned at a different time, or if I stayed in her room longer. She fell less than 10 minutes after I finished. I do not blame the caregivers at all as they were very busy and had no way of knowing she would get out of bed when she did. As someone who kicked off a series of events what resulted in my own grandmother's death, there is no reason to blame yourself. Yes, you could have done things differently, and I could have too, but we didn't. Just have to live with it as an unfortunate learning experience, I guess. A childhood friend suffered liver failure and was on a breathing machine. When she breathed her last, her father could not bring himself to turn off the breathing apparatus. So, I did. And then the men from the funeral home came. They were very polite, and we gave them all the info they needed for them to do their job. Her stepmother stayed at the house, while I took her dad out for ice cream, just to be away from the scene. It was a warm summer night, and we walked and talked and had ice cream at the local Sweet Frog. You may think that might not qualify, but there is a moment of finality when you switch off a friend's oxygen machine. About 6 months after, I was visiting a friend, recounting the story, and suddenly the dam burst and I cried for hours. Damn, at least you could give them a peaceful death than they could have suffered. This just shows how considerate you are. Sure, there's no way for a normal human being to take another person's life on purpose and not feel guilty about it, but you were ready to sacrifice your mental health to put an end to another person's suffering. You honored your friend and her family by being there for her and her father. If anything ever happened to me, I hope there's someone like you there for my friends and family too. Was there a reason the family were the ones to pull the plug? In my limited experience, the doctor and nurse took care of that and then we sat with the patient for a few more moments while nature took its course. Grandma didn't take long after, but grandpa hung out for a few more hours. But in neither case did anybody in the family have to be the ones to physically remove life support. There was a series of events. She got sick and went to the hospital and was put on a donor's list. Then upon further examination during her stay, a gross oversimplification of the events, she was taken off the donor's list and transferred to hospice. She told us this is not where she wants to die. There was a lot of back and forth, and it looks days, but we got permission to take her home. She rode in an ambulance, the rest of us in my car. When we got back to the house, the paramedics, I assume they came with the ambulance, assembled a little folding chair to carry her inside and up the stairs upon. One of the paramedics plopped herself hard into the seat, and it collapsed. She dusted herself off and said the reason I tried is it can't collapse under the patient. Adjustments were made, she tried it again and it was stable, and they carried our girl in, and put her in bed. And that's where she stayed, surrounded by her folks and a few friends. She sure was happy to be home. That last sentence got to me out of the blue. You're a good person for being there when your friend and their family needed you. 2 men broke into my house late at night. I shot them. 1 died. Sorry you had to go through that. Thank you. I don't feel guilty, but it's hard to put something like that behind you. I know what you mean, man. Be strong. As much as they had it coming, it doesn't make it any less tough. I admire you being able to talk about it. Though if the gun were in their hands, I don't think they would have hesitated. Glad you're safe. Scary it. 2 guys broke into my apartment when I lived in Maryland a few years ago. I happened to be awake in my living room after midnight watching some old boxing stuff on YouTube and had my gun on my chair with me. It happened so quick. I instinctively grabbed my gun when I heard my door opening and had it pointed at them before I even said anything. Still scares it out of me to this day. Always lock your doors, people. I killed my sister's unborn baby. We were teenagers and playing softball. I didn't know she was pregnant, and I hit a line drive she pitched to me. It hit her right in the abdomen. That is awful. I can't imagine how you must have felt. I hope you don't blame yourself. It's pretty fricked up. One friend was there when it happened and knew about it, and I recently told my boyfriend about it. Other than that, I don't talk about it. I'm in a bad place today and just started answering it on Reddit. As someone that got hit by a line drive while 5 weeks pregnant, you did not hurt the baby. She had a miscarriage on its own. You would literally have to hit her pelvic floor from above the pubic bone in order to hurt a pregnancy that is less than 10 weeks. That's actually why a fetal ultrasound has to be done vaginally before 15 weeks, because you can't see the fetal cells behind bone. So unless she was over 10 weeks, then it was 100% nothing to do with you. Again, this is coming from someone that took a line drive to the stomach so hard I had a bruise for a month, at 5 weeks pregnant. Also adding, I have a happy, completely healthy 2-year-old. Same pregnancy that I took the ball. And I hope your day got or gets better, my friend. I think it was just a bad day for a lot of people. My anxiety was sky high all day, but my brain couldn't rationalize it, so it just made me unexplainable angry at everything.